promise I won't bite. So please give a warm welcome to Dr. Melanie Polkosky.
I will try. Thank you. Good morning. Isn't this fun, seeing all these women talking about technology this morning? Okay, I have a chart deck, as you might expect. So my name is Melanie Polkosky. I've been at IBM now for over a decade, which seems like a really, really long time, compared to, so I'm feeling a little old this morning, which is kind of funny, because I've been used to being called the baby for so long. But I'm a psychologist at IBM, which is kind of a weird thing to be. And that was actually the basis of where my talk today kind of came from. So do we have the slides available? Yeah, good. OK, great. Thank you. So, so when I joined IBM, it was there we go. Yay. OK. When I joined IBM, it became rather quickly apparent to me that I was a bit of an odd duck. Being a psychologist, being a woman, I looked around me and I saw typically a bunch of male engineers. And a lot of the clients that I now work with, I walk into a room and I'm one of very few women and usually the only person with a behavioral science and humanities background. So, as I kind of have moved through my career, this question has become very central to me. So, how could I honor the fact that I am a woman, I am rather unique, and trying to struggle to understand why do I feel very different? Like I view my job, even when there are other men doing the same job that I'm doing, I seem to have a very different perspective, priorities, ways of thinking about what I do. So this question became central to me sort of understanding myself in this context. And like a good psychologist, the way that I went about answering this question was to begin to look at the research. So the information I'm about to share with you is sort of my way of understanding myself within this context of technology. So this is some data that comes from a, okay, my technology is a little bit whack today. But this comes from a study in 2003 on personality types and gender in the technology industry. And it's kind of a good summary of a variety of other studies that came before this. So people have started to look in psychology at personality styles and really cognitive styles. Because if you think about designing technology, designing services around technology, it has to do with the decisions we make and our personalities in terms of how we reason about who our users are, how we understand what we're doing. So it's become kind of fun to look at personality variables and how they impact ultimately usability. So usability is something that we all strive for, we talk about a lot in technology, but it's very difficult to achieve. And as you know, there are a lot of business outcomes, very positive business outcomes, that can come from highly usable, engaging products. Look at some of the great brands that we've already talked about this morning: Facebook, Apple, Twitter. So this data is from a study of technology people versus the US population using a very familiar personality measure called the Myers-Briggs. And what they found is that there is a significant concentration of people who are highly analytic. On this chart, it is the blue, the lower part of the graph. There is a significant concentration of thinking type people. So these are very cause and effect related, analytical decision makers, very logical in their decision making style. And you can see in the technology industry, we have about 80% who are this thinking type. In contrast, in the US population, we have around 40%. Now, interestingly enough, there's also a gender split. You know, as many of us know, women tend to be in the minority in the technology industry, but they're also sort of the minority in terms of their thinking or analytic. There tends to be around 75, some studies say as many as 80% of women are actually feeling. So we make decisions not from a logical, analytical place, but based on our intuition about what other people feel. Okay? Whereas men, only 43% of men are that sort of intuitive, concerned with how other people feel. The other issue is when you look at other aspects of psychology, we know that women are highly motivated to be intuitive about other people. So, you know, and this effect is not really seen to the same extent in men. So even when women are this sort of other style, thinking style, they tend to be very motivated to be intuitive and very in tune with how other people are feeling. Now, the researchers have suggested that this difference and the fact that we have so many thinking people in technology is what really underlies the fact that many of the products we build in the industry are not terribly usable. And you can see the quote here. The fact is the greatest difference between engineers and the general population is the percentage that takes action based on what they think rather than on what other people feel. That does not help bring the software engineers any closer to the user. So in fact, it's this difference in cognitive style that's consistent with, you know, some of the differences between men and women's predominant ways of making decisions that in fact result in the usability issues in many of our products. So taking this a step further, this is from a 2009 study that was essentially measuring the same thing. They called it something slightly different. So systematizing is the sort of cause and effect, logical, analytic type decision maker versus empathizing, so the person who's highly intuitive, thinking about other people. And this is the scores for females. So if you look at the green, sort of the wide green line, our reference point, so the general population is the dotted green line. You can see empathy or empathizing is very high in women. And in the technology industry, we have also very high empathy as women technologists. We have a little dip toward the right side of this graph. As women are in increasingly technical roles, we do have the tendency to sort of take a little bit of a dip in terms of our empathy for other people. Okay? But nothing significant at all. The blue line refers to the systematizing, so that analytic ability. And you can see, as you might expect, women in technology tend to be more systematizing than our dotted blue line, which is our reference, sort of the general population. Okay? And as women become increasingly technical, their ability to systematize goes up. So they become more highly analytic. You know, I think that's pretty expected, right, in terms of results. Now let's compare that with men. First we'll talk about the green lines, the empathizing ability. From left to right, the green line, you can see the sort of thick green line going down is men's empathizing ability. As they become more technical or are in more technical roles, their ability to understand and empathize with the user goes down rather dramatically. But in sort of the reference population or the general population, that dotted green line stays consistent across. And as we might expect, systematizing, the blue line, as men become more highly technical, their ability to be logical, analytical, cause and effect decision makers goes up. So this again sort of reinforces that, you know, as our leadership, which is often largely male, becomes more highly technical, their ability to really understand that their perspective, their way of understanding the world differs significantly from other people's. And here is where I think women have a significant advantage in terms of really moving technology forward and creating great innovation. So it's fun, in my own experience, thinking about personality styles, I did do the Myers-Briggs on myself, and it turned out that I'm what's called an INFJ. So I actually represent the most underrepresented, virtually not represented, personality type in technology. So people like me tend to be in education. They tend to be psychologists. I was all of those things before I came to the technology industry. So kind of got something right. I just wound up in a little different environment. So my feeling of being a fish out of water is, actually fairly well grounded. But what's really great is when you take a personality like me, this very underrepresented personality type, and you put me together with someone who is very technical, very analytic. These are the opportunities that I think really create incredible innovation in technology. So, because what you then have is the thinkers, the feelers, you have that whole gamut represented of not only what do people want, what do people like, how do we do this, with the way to implement it as well. So it's a very powerful combination. And you can see just kind of from going down these lists that there's sort of two sides of the same coin. Thinkers can really benefit from feeling types, their ability to understand human values, to be intuitive about people, to anticipate their needs and predict what they want. Whereas feeling types like me benefit from our engineering friends who can really be analytic, logical, objective, and really rely on principles and policies to get things done effectively. So I think this is sort of the key of innovation in terms of building not only technology, but services in the technology industry as well. So because women are so highly motivated to be intuitive about people, I think that we have an incredible opportunity as women in the industry to really drive innovation around user experience and to be the leadership to do this. But creating usability is actually very hard to do because it's essentially centered in our teams and our people who are creating our products, our services. So how can we do that as women? I know there's a lot of women in all different kinds of roles here today. And I really think there's several keys. Many of the companies I've worked with, usability activities are optional. So, I think, you go, one of the first things I look at when I go into a new client is, what is the process for ensuring user feedback, that we understand who we're building for, what are the deliverables around user-centered design within this company. Oftentimes there are none at all, and there is no one who is really responsible for that role within individual products or from a strategic sort of perspective overall. Sometimes there's one or the other, but they're not aligned. So I think at the top of the pyramid, having a user experience project methodology, deliverables, making them required and not optional is critical. They should be as critical as something like code. Having user personas developed, having step-by-step use cases, having documentation of usability testing results. All of these things are critical to ultimately the success of your product and your services. Going down to the left lower triangle there, our hiring practices are also, I think, critical. And we hear about this all the time. I think women are great champions of diversity in hiring. And certainly, I think hiring women is important. But it's not just hiring women who are relatively similar to the men that we work with. I think having people, so representing the Fs, in other words. So these women like me who probably have a very, very divergent background, very atypical background, becomes important because we are the people that pair with the technologists and engineers to really represent the user as well as implementation. Just for fun, the other day I went out on one of the big job listings, and it's actually very easy to find lots and lots of help wanted ads for user experience people. So the thing that I see over and over again is when you see a job listing, is that there's, and this one is a great example. This is the second one I looked at. So this is very easy to come across. As you go through the first couple of bullets and you're going, okay, this is cool. It's a web design type job. They need someone with really good graphic skill. That's great. Creative, storyboarding, wireframes. All these are great skills, right? And they do reside in someone you would be putting in this type of role. You get down to the last 3 bullets, and suddenly you're doing optimization of engines. You're doing testing, code. You're actually coding. And typically what happens is you don't have those skills, like the cream of the crop sort of coding skills, residing in the same brain as extremely creative, kind of right brain, if you will, creative activities. So what is essentially happening is when you ultimately put someone in that role, you have to decide, what is this person going to be? Is he primarily a coder that happens to do UI design? I think that's what happens most of the time. Or is this person, really a background that is high quality? I understand users, I understand visual design. In my case, I've spent a lot of my career in auditory and voice design. So my background is actually in English. I was a speech pathologist for a while, so it kind of makes sense that I'm doing writing conversational design as the main part of my job. I cannot code at all. Do not even talk to me about coding. But it's interesting because there has been times in my career where I've wondered, should I learn to code to make myself more relevant? So that's just a quick example. So personality diversity, I think creating that personality diversity, and doing that maybe in concert with gender diversity programs is critically important to innovation and effective technology design. And then finally, that, creating that diversity, just because you have the people and the personnel doesn't necessarily mean it will integrate into a heavily technical team. I know for myself, being an INFJ, one of the things we really, really like is harmony in teams, creating harmony. And one of the things I've had to come to terms with in my career is that I am a disruptive force on any team I get on, right? And that's been incredibly difficult for me to deal with. So early on, I resisted that. My tendency was to stay quiet, to go, oh my gosh, I'm looking at this completely differently than everybody else I'm working with. My tendency was just to kind of, shh, be quiet, I don't want anyone to know that, I'm not supposed to be here. So, it's been a concerted effort on my part to, become more assertive, all of those things that you hear as women we need to do in business to make that happen and to really make my voice heard and get, people who are not inclined to see the relevance of a different perspective listening to me. So, going back to that question that I kind of opened with, how do I honor my strengths as a woman? I think each of us, ultimately that starts with understanding ourselves. For me, as one of these very underrepresented personality types in technology, it has meant, that I kind of stick it out. Sometimes I'm in very difficult situations. I've had to become more assertive than I prefer to be. Just really strive to do what I can to make my perspective heard on my teams. If you're a woman who is not one of the underrepresented, maybe as an overrepresented personality type, I think you have a role to play too that's very essential, because you can recognize that there is this sort of difference in personality styles in the technology industry, and then really become an advocate. Because I think really creating usable, fun products and services for real people to use really does take a village, and I think women can be the leadership of that village. So I guess I will take questions at this point. Hi, yeah.
Pardon my voice, I guess it's okay. My name is Benita Banducci, and I teach gender and engineering at Santa Clara University, and I'm just so thrilled by your presentation because this is one of the points that I make in the class. And I have found that by using language that focuses more on identifying differences as competencies is really effective. Because the guys often, they want something that's like a skill or an action or an object that they can get a handle on.
Right.
So I talk about customer focus as being either, usually the guys, what I call the more individualistic people are customer focused from the standpoint of I know what's best for the customer because I'm the expert.
Right.
Whereas often the more relational people, most of whom are women, know from standing in the shoes of the customer and actually say that that's a competency of being able to stand in the shoes of the customer and look from there. So, you know, I'm eager to talk to you afterwards and collaborate on some of these things, but I'd like to know how you talk to the men about your competencies and how successful you've been. I think it'd be really interesting for everyone to hear how you actually adapt them to your difference so that they can really utilize your difference.
Yeah, I will say, you know, just being really honest, that varies from team to team, and there have been times where I am spectacularly unsuccessful in trying to communicate. So I would say, though, my most successful strategies have been several. One, being a former speech pathologist and English teacher, I have been blessed with pretty good communication and especially negotiation ability. So I have definitely refined that through my career. But I find that the guys, we'll refer to them as the guys, tend to respond very well. Being a Ph.D. in psych, you know, one of the things that you have pounded into you in psychology is that we can't trust essentially our own perception. So research, data, you know, becomes critical to our education. So ironically, most of the education for Ph.D. in psychology is statistics training. And that is what I personally have found, you know, one of my big benefits in dealing with you know, people who are very highly analytic and don't see the relevance of what I do, is if I'm able to put it in a numeric form for them and give them data, that suddenly starts to make sense to them. The other thing is, you know, actually engaging them in things like usability testing, where they can watch someone, you know, sitting with whatever it is they're doing, you know, they're building, and just going, wow, I don't get this at all. You know, that can be very powerful. So instead of just hearing about it, you know, we had usability testing and people were confused by, you know, they tend to sort of sometimes dismiss that as, well, they weren't following the directions, or, you know, they didn't do it right. You know, no, it's that, you know, this is built from a perceptual or logical framework that is completely unlike how this person thinks. You know, that's different. So I would say, you know, putting it in terms of numbers, sometimes I've charmed my way into a lot of projects, to be perfectly honest, you know, which I think, you know, as a woman, once I get in there then, I'm pulling out, you know, the statistics, the research. I know my psych research, you know, backwards and forwards, and put me in a room with a bunch of guys and I start citing research, and they don't, you know, usually they just kind of go, okay, well, you know. So, you know, I think it's a combination of being competent, having really great communication abilities, appreciating and understanding their perspective as well. That was on the list of one of the things that, feeling and thinking types when you put them together. Because I appreciate their perspective too. And one of the things I say a lot to the engineers I work with is, I totally validate that you would do it that way. I understand why that would make sense. However, what I want you to understand is that is perhaps a fringe case. That is not how the majority of the population would use this product. So that kind of thing. So I would say it varies, but yeah, data has been very powerful for me. So thank you for your comments. Other questions? You see one? Hi, sorry.
Hi, Melanie. Thanks so much for your presentation. I really appreciate it. I wanted to share with you the award for the top Stanford Graduate School of Business professor actually was in your field.
Yay!
Yeah, so your area and your presentation is very relevant, and it's definitely a growing area. My question to you is, have you done any studies with regards to time? And the reason why is because the professor that won the award, she also is a Ph.D. in psychology and also in marketing, and she found a correlation for time. And the idea was that at different ages or different segmentations for customers, time becomes more relevant. So for example, if somebody likes a product more, they spend more time with it, and how they spend that time is different in their 30s, 40s versus in their 50s, 60s. And so I just wondered if IBM has done any research in terms of time and usability correlation.
Yeah, I mean, we do have a very large human factors, user experience community, so I can't speak, across the whole community. I know for myself, time and age is, huge huge independent variables in psychology. So in my own research, most of my career has been in the area of speech technology. So I have found things like effects of age, effects of gender in terms of how people engage with speech technology, for example. I think that's a very common finding. I mean, we know like across the age range that, the way 20-somethings are engaging is very different, of course, than, our grandparents or even parents are too. So I would say that's a very common variable. So yeah, that's pretty widely done. In speech technology, and I think this is kind of interesting because, another reason that I think women can really be leaders in this area is that, the types of technology or the uses of technology now that we're really getting into, social media, mediated communication forms, speech technology, all of these things are getting into areas of social interaction and communication where there are known gender differences between men and women, in terms of how they communicate, what they communicate, how they interact. So I think that's going to become more and more relevant. I know in my own research in the area of speech technology usability, I have seen effects, and there's a known, most speech technology is used to provide as a means of service delivery today, right? So I have seen the known gender effect in just face-to-face service delivery carry over to service delivery, automated service delivery as well. So that's kind of interesting, and in usability testing, for example, with speech technology, women are much more sensitive and responsive to things like politeness on the part of the system than men are. So there's really cool effects like that, and that carries over. Age plays a role in that as well. So great effects, but yeah, thanks for your comments. That's really yay for Stanford. Anyone else? Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.